Steve Person. I'm a retired funeral director. I was a funeral director for 47 years. And during that period of time, being in several funeral homes, you can't believe how much you might find on the top shelf in the prep room or the attic of the garage or the basement someplace. But I've collected a number of things over the years. And I have it here at the International Convention and getting to show a lot of people. One of the things that comes up quite frequently is embalming. When did embalming get started? 1800s. Of course, embalming goes all the way back to the Egyptians, but the way we know it today, the 1800s. Prior to embalming, they wanted to save the body as long as they possibly could. And one of the ways they did it was with ice. And this is an ice coffin. The whole idea here was the body would be put down into the base of the coffin. This galvanized tray would be put over it, and then this tray would be filled with ice. Understand, in the 1800s, no refrigeration. Ice, if you were going to find it, would be in somebody's ice house, and they weren't too crazy about giving it up if they didn't have to.
So the body would be down here below the...
The body would be down here, this tray would be set over the top.
And filled with ice.
And filled with ice.
Ingenious.
Then what would happen is this lid, which is very heavy, basically to keep the ice as long as possible, would be put in place. And then what would happen when the people came to the parlor of the house to view, they would look down through this window right into the face of the deceased. That way they didn't have to open the coffin and let some of that cold air out. Okay?
Or the smell.
Yeah, or the smell, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
Later on, we saw embalming by soaking, usually in arsenic or alcohol. Okay? The story is of the lady whose husband died. She had a tin coffin built for her husband. She had the body put in that tin coffin, and then she filled it with whiskey. There the body stayed under her bed. Yeah, until spring, when it could be put on a train and moved to Illinois for a spring burial. But that was another way of embalming. During the 1850s and 1860s, the Civil War came along. 600,000 soldiers died. And they were wanting to get as many of those back home as they possibly could. So a gentleman by the name of Dr. Thomas Holmes, who we consider the father of embalming, had developed a number of ways of embalming, and what he came up with as the most effective was arterial embalming. In other words, circulating a preservative fluid through the arterial system. So this is what we have over here is an example of a mannequin I have set up the way that it would normally have been embalmed during the Civil War. In this jar they would mix up the fluid, and then it would be hand pumped out of that jar and into the arterial system. Now, it usually takes about 3 gallons of fluid to embalm a body. You pump 3 gallons of fluid into a closed system, you're getting nothing but swollen, puffy look. So that's when you would start using the vein with a drain tube in it, or a drain tube. It's a good word for it.
That's the one that's marked with the blue.
That's the vein.
Okay.
And so what they would do is open the vein and allow it to drain into a jar as such, and once it got full, they would take it out and dump it and dispose of it. Okay?
And you've got a kit here with all sorts of tools.
And later on, of course, well into the 1900s, everything was done at home. So what used to be a cooling board that the body was taken out of the bed, the deathbed, and placed on to cool it, ended up being an embalming table, which was usually done in the kitchen of the house.
Oh, wow.
And so they would make up a kit like such to be able to carry all of their equipment into the house to do the embalming.
And then over here you have a cooling table with a screen or over it.
Veil.
A veil, yes.
And this, again, in the 1800s, first in the early 1800s, the family would do all of the preparation of the body and get it ready for disposal. Later on, the community would come together to do this work for them. It usually took two people, the same sex as the deceased, to wash and bathe the body and then to dress it. And then it would be placed on this type of a cooling board and with the veil over it for viewing until that coffin was made, which was usually made by the furniture maker in the community.
And that's how furniture makers became undertakers.
Exactly. When they realized that they learned the trade of the undertaker and some of the tricks, a few things like that, they could charge not only for the coffin, but for the undertaking side of it also. Undertaking the undertaker is the beginning of today's funeral director. Like I said, in those days they had a couple of people from the community that would come in and take care of. Well, it got to be that there was a particular individual in each community that kind of specialized, took a little extra care. A perfectionist maybe is the best word to put it, because Mom always looked good when this particular individual took care of bodies. It got to the point where the community started calling that one individual to come in and undertake the responsibilities of laying out the deceased for burial.
And then, of course, the addition of embalming really set the undertaker apart as a funeral professional.
Right. It took a long time, and let's hold off on that just a half a second. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Mary had his body embalmed. And it was because of that embalming and that slow 19-day trip around the United States, which allowed a country to pay respects to their fallen leader, that the public got to see the result of what embalming could do for them. It highly received after that. Now, if I can ask you to come on. This case is a case of empty embalming fluid bottles from the Max Hunky Chemical Company. If you see on the front of the case, it says, when empty, return to Max Hunky Chemical Company, New York, New York. So the chemical would be sent out to the undertaker like this. When he was finished, he would pack it all up and send it back to Max Hunky. The interesting thing about this is the fact that Max Hunky was in business from 1886 to 1890. 4 years. What he did then, he sold the company to his partner, who in turn changed the name to Embalmers Supply Company, or as we know them today, ESCO. What did Max Hunky do after that? He did what a lot of chemical companies did, and that was to go out and start a mortuary school. You cannot sell your chemical and your product unless you got people trained and know how to use it. That's where we really started training the undertaker. You would have seen embalming usually more frequently in the larger cities, obviously, because that's where more people were. But over the years and into the early 1900s, that's when embalming got out into the local communities. You were seeing more and more funeral parlors with embalmers, and at that point, yes, they were starting to get licensed, certified, things like that. Once it got to that point, then they were considered a professional, and at that point, the name really started changing to the funeral director. That would be the history.
Well, what a wonderful tour. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I always like to talk about my hobby to people, so thank you for coming in.